Alright, boys and girls, I am once again fixing to do a discovery tour. Let me make sure I got my mic going. And I am going to get my phone ready so that I can see any commentary that comes up. And yeah, I'm going to disable my Bluetooth because listening to myself caused me to lose my train of thought rather badly. And let's see. Just setting up here. Have to use what means I can. And I accidentally closed my app. So I'm going to open it again. Just a few more seconds. Oh dear. I wish I had a better phone, to be honest. It goes really slow, and by slow I mean bleeping slow. Okay, there we are. Okay guys, welcome back. I am, at this point, waiting for my friend. Okay, cool. Hello, hello. And, well, we've done the Egypt ones, we've done the pyramid ones. Alexandria, I think, is where we were at. So this one will be the Siege of Alexandria. How's the audio and the graphics? I'll go ahead and get this going. When let me know how the images go. This is the detail modifiers at 160% instead of the 200 that I like for taking pictures. It gets a bit too choppy. The frame rate drops. Super. Because I can actually see a bit of a loss of detail on my end, but I have my nice big monitor and I can't stream in HD. So at the moment I'm using Layla Hassan because of her spectacular personality. And I guess I'll go ahead and let it rip. This is the Siege of Alexandria. This will be a bit prolific, I think, but it's interesting. But it's also sad.
Welcome to the Siege of Alexandria.
I think because they didn't have proper markers when they were building the city, I think they used grain to do markers for this shall be here, this will be there. And the scribes did their work. I love the detail of this game. Gosh, I never get over it.
Among the collection of writings attributed to Julius Caesar are his descriptions of the Siege of Alexandria, the Gallic Wars, and the commentaries on the Civil War. These archives contain information on different campaigns, the Wars of Alexandria, Africa, and Spain. Each of them recounts Caesar's military activity from 58 BCE to 45 BCE. Though Caesar's documents remain a main source of information, it's important to note that the perspective is limited. It is necessary for other historical documents to be taken into consideration to provide a better understanding of events.
And what I'm going to do is remove the subtitles because they kind of get in the way of the exhibits. And I think it might be under language. Subtitle display off. And the blue sea glass things behind Caesar. I'm going to take a look because I was a bit distracted.
Among the collection of writings attributed to
behind
Julius
the bust.
Caesar
That
are his
is
descriptions of the siege
lapis
of
lazuli.
Alexandria, the Gallic Wars, and the commentaries on the Civil
And they
War.
got lapis
These
lazuli
archives
from
contain information on different
mines
campaigns,
in
the
present
wars
day
of Alexandria,
Afghanistan.
Africa, and Spain.
The Egyptians
Each of them recounts Caesar's military
sent
activity from 58
either
BCE
trade
to 45
convoys
BCE.
or
Though Caesar's
force.
documents remain a main source
You're
of
going to give us
information,
this.
it's important to note that the perspective is limited. It is necessary
Sorry,
for other
I
historical documents
misjudged.
to be
I thought it
taken
was
into
something in the exhibit.
consideration.
I'm going to go ahead and continue with this one.
The Siege of Alexandria closely relays the events of the Civil War that led up to the event and describes how Caesar was besieged in the palace of the Ptolemies. Other ancient authors have left equally valuable and sometimes contradictory information.
And as a bit of trivia, the lapis lazuli, even today, I think most of it comes from Afghanistan. It's like a central place for it, but I think you can get some in the United States, but there was no US of A at this time. I feel kind of silly for misunderstanding the question. It's like, oh, was it on that exhibit? And this is turquoise. Turquoise was mined in Sinai. But, lapis lazuli was a supreme, because of its color, it had a lot of connection to the pharaoh and the gods.
In the events leading up to the siege of Alexandria, Cleopatra VII and her brother were fighting over control of Egypt. Young King Ptolemy XIII's regent, Pothinus, had firm control over the young pharaoh, and an outmaneuvered Cleopatra soon went into hiding. This set the stage for Pompey's arrival in Alexandria. Having lost his battle against Caesar in 48 BCE, the Roman general turned to his allies, the Egyptians, for safe harbor. But on the advice of Pothinus, Ptolemy XIII had Pompey assassinated in the hopes of earning Caesar's favor. This would turn out to be a most unfortunate decision.
Today, lapis lazuli is purchased from there, and it's used by jewelers today still, and I think people also make carvings with them. A lot of the blue scarab amulets are made of it with golden
Upon
rings.
his arrival in Alexandria, Caesar was presented with Pompey's head. The sight of a Roman murdered by Egyptians did not sit well with him. Caesar made his displeasure clear, ordering the return of Cleopatra, and for the siblings to resolve their differences and resume their co-rule of Egypt, as per the will of their father. Neither Pothinus nor Ptolemy XIII wished to accede to this demand. While doing his best to aggravate Caesar, Pothinus secretly plotted against the Roman ruler and sent word for Egyptian general Achilles to bring his 20,000 men to fight on his behalf. While Pothinus plotted against Caesar, Cleopatra made a bold move.
The Ptolemies were a notoriously messed up family. The first three Ptolemies were okay, but the Ptolemies were something else. One had an ironic name, well, we call it Philopater, but they they use the expression Philopater, lover of the father, right? Well, I think he had his father murdered. And another one, yeah, I can't remember which one. I think it was Ptolemy the fifth. Had his son chopped up into pieces and sent to his wife for her birthday. That was something. Wow, this is one hell of a jog from point to point. I wonder if I'm doing this right. I think I have screwed up. What the? Who's doing? Oh, never mind. Just from the running. Sorry, I kind of thought there was a little something going on. And if there was, I had to see it. Oh, for peace sake. I'm just going to cut across. This is the palace. Ugh. Gosh, this would have taken an hour to walk along here. Good golly, Miss Molly.
There are various descriptions of the encounter between Caesar and Cleopatra. One report states that she snuck into the palace alone at night. Another account claims she was accompanied by an ally and was brought inside the palace wrapped in a carpet bag. Though exactly what happened at this fateful meeting is up for debate, what is known is that Cleopatra met with Caesar and earned his approval. Pothinus and Ptolemy XIII were most vexed with this turn of events.
Oh yeah, he would be. All right. It's hard for me to imagine that a palace built 2,100 years ago could seem magnificent by our standards today. But I think a lot was lost in the Dark Age. Oops. Oh, yeah, they are. Sorry. I'm sorry. I'm getting a bit distracted. I read it, but I'm thinking I'm a bit loopy, I think. But yeah, I have to kind of chill out a little bit because I've been farming money in the game. What am I? I'm just gonna go straight to the next. Enough of this following these lines thing. I'm just gonna go from point to point. Sorry about that. I haven't done this one in almost a year. And I do remember it being kind of long, and by the time it was over, it's the part of the part of the history that I love about Egypt the most is about Egypt itself, not the politics of Rome and Greece and how they carved Egypt like a Thanksgiving turkey. But yeah, I do tend to do that. I don't know if you can plow through people while they're celebrating. Nope, you can't. But I've been doing horrible things to get money in the game to, mad hunting, killing every guard possible, selling their weapons and stuff.
With Cleopatra finally present, Caesar chose to act as mediator between the siblings in the hopes of a peaceful resolution. It did not take long for things to sour. During a banquet given to celebrate the reconciliation, there was an assassination attempt on Caesar. It was the Roman leader's own barber who thwarted the attack. Once it was revealed that the king's regent, Pothinus, had ordered the attack, Caesar had him executed. He then placed the young king under guard.
Yeah, the Ptolemy, I think 13th, was easily influenced by people who wanted to use him to get done what they wanted done. And he had that Ptolemaic lust for power. Cleopatra, the main credit I'll give her is that she learned the language of the people. It was a shrewd move, but it also solidified her status as being Egyptian. To be an Egyptian, all you had to do was do as an Egyptian did. It didn't really matter what your skin color was. As long as you played the good Egyptian, you got to be one. Whoops. Oh, that's just an artistic picture, but it's good, but it's not from the period or what have you. Okay, now where's the next? I guess they do this so that you can see the party, so you can say, oh, excuse me. Hi, oops, sorry. Sorry. Oops, hey. You guys enjoying yourselves? I will be a bit more dignified in the future. But I have been wantonly going through crowds with bloodlust, slaughtering Greeks and Romans and getting their weapons to sell and try to get rare legendaries with loot boxes. It's been a long process, but my character has every piece of gear that I really want. The rest is just a little fluff. So I'm happy with what I got. Just one of those collect them all.
Caught within the palace with roughly 4,000 troops, and with the knowledge that the arrival of enemy forces was imminent, Caesar sent for help from Syria, Rhodes, and Cilicia. He ordered his men to dig a ditch around the palace and build a wall leading to the harbor. This would ensure Caesar's access to the sea. When Egyptian General Achilles arrived in the city with 20,000 men, the battle for Alexandria began.
And the library did not fare well with that battle. It sustained damage, but I don't think it lost everything or destroyed them, but it was seriously damaged. And I like how they kind of recreate the environment of that time.
With so few men at his disposal, Caesar could not risk a battle just yet. He sent ambassadors to Achilles in the name of Ptolemy to propose a truce. Knowing that the orders did not come from the young king, and angered by the pharaoh's imprisonment, Achilles had the messengers assassinated. With Caesar confined within the palace, Achilles positioned his troops around the city. Skirmishes broke out throughout the streets of Alexandria and went on for several days and nights. Though they were outnumbered, Caesar's men were able to hold the enemy back. This prompted Achilles' next move: capture the Roman fleet stationed in the harbor.
And I can tell that this narrator is Canadian. Are you gonna let me through? Oh, excuse me. People are never happy with what they got. Well, Caesar both went through brutal stuff and conducted very brutal stuff. Oh, I can honestly say that there are, or were, much worse people than Caesar. He actually instituted some reforms, but it upset the status quo, and they had their republic, which was really, it was still an oligarchy, really, just like our republic is It's nothing but an oligarchy. It's not really a republic, and certainly not a democracy. I don't think there was very many people having a party during the battle, but I think that was one area to depict a scene. But I love the recreation of this city. It's really a magnificent, really magnificent thing. I wonder, this is so juvenile. I don't know if the kid will react the same way. This is really impolite. I'm going to look for a youngster. I don't know if they'll... There's one. This is really not nice, but I don't know how they'll react. Oh, they won't do it in the game. If you get real close to a kid and they fall over, they start crying. They can't be seriously harmed in the game. Just like real life, you know. Children can't get injured. There are also no pregnant people in the game. They just magically appear.
Although the palace offered protection, losing the port meant the end of help and supplies. Caesar knew he had to protect the fleet.
Child abuse.
While he and his troops succeeded in regaining control of the port, he knew it would be impossible to sustain. Caesar ordered the burning of the ships. With passage back to the palace closed off, he headed for the lighthouse of Alexandria.
Definitely Canadian, a lighthouse. And the other name for the lighthouse was the Pharos.
Fighting their way through the Egyptian troops, Caesar and his men eventually reached Pharos Island. There, they took refuge within the lighthouse. With easy access to the open sea, Caesar was able to send messages to his allies requesting reinforcements and more supplies. The island fort also allowed him to control access to the harbor by relying on the chains used by the Egyptians to control ship traffic to and from Alexandria's docks.
Well, here it's depicted that Caesar ordered the ship set on fire. I think it was more of a sending a message thing, because you can't miss flames. But I think he had a fleet kind of far away. And I do believe that somebody snuck into there on Pharos Island and went up and put a bunch of copper sulfites in the flames and made it glow green, which was basically the, hey, come here, I'm in trouble. And with overwhelming power, Caesar's boys kicked the living shit out of the Ptolemaic soldiers.
The exact chronology of events during the war in Alexandria remain imprecise. Conflicting accounts raise questions as to when, and even if, the Great Library of Alexandria was burned down at all. One account states that during the fighting, docks and warehouses were burned, and this was the fire that spread to the library. In another account, when Achilles cut off the harbor, Caesar had to leave the safety of the palace to defend his ships. As the enemies battled across the port, their arsenals set ships ablaze, and this destruction spread to the library.
Yeah, things do catch fire accidentally too. But there's also no better way of saying, hey, things are not going very well here, than having everything on fucking fire. And to this day, the burning of the Great Library and its content just really upsets me.
In either case, the Great Library was not completely destroyed. Experts point out that its location was too far from the harbor. and much later texts refer to the Great Library as being intact. Warehouses near the harbor contained manuscript copies awaiting export, and it is more likely that these documents were destroyed than the Great Library itself.
What makes the library valuable is its contents, not what it's made of. Just one of the things.
The destruction of the Great Library may have been due to a number of fires over the ages. Its end was probably closer to the 4th century CE, when the Christian Emperor Theodosius I ordered the closure of all pagan temples. While some documents survived after being moved away, it remains unclear just what knowledge may have been lost.
Now I do wonder if there was anything on how the Great Pyramids were made, put in there. I wonder what herb lore was lost. Certainly information by Aristarchus of how it was determined that the earth was round was in there, and how it went around the sun and not the other way around.
Where there are accounts of Achilles being in control of the battle against Caesar, it appears that instead Cleopatra's sister, siding with her brother, had him killed and put her ally Ganymedes in his place. Ganymedes proved a valuable tactician for the Egyptian side. It was his idea to cut Caesar's access to the harbor, thus trapping Caesar at the palace.
And these statues of Ptolemy in the game are things that you can destroy. And in Egyptian communities, usually you have people cheer you on for doing so. Ptolemies were just despicable in later periods.
During the time of Ptolemy I, canals had been dug throughout Alexandria to provide fresh water. Ganymedes had his men take control of these canals. After isolating their own water supply, he had his men pour salt water into the canals and cisterns that led to Caesar's camp.
Boy, that was crafty. Devious, but it's cunning.
Panic erupted in Caesar's men.
37.
They wouldn't last long without fresh water. Recognizing that the porous limestone could help them, Caesar and his men dug wells to restore their water supply. Days later, the 37th Legion, comprised of Pompey's soldiers, arrived by ship. Unable to come ashore due to the winds, Caesar risked going out to meet them on the peninsula, Cape Chersonese. When the enemy learned Caesar's location, they rushed to intercept. Despite an obvious advantage for the Alexandrians, Caesar, with a Rhodian ship full of skillful sailors, emerged victorious.
Well, they also had Roman legions. They make mincemeat of phalanxes. The phalanx was supreme in its day, but the Roman legions were better equipped and had better tactics.
With help from the Allied ships, Caesar's victory enabled him to push the Egyptians back and secure the lighthouse. Gaining control of Pharos Island sent the Alexandrians into the sea and swimming back to the city. However, Caesar's fortification of the island didn't last long. The enemy regrouped and were set to storm the island. Panic-stricken, in spite of Caesar's encouragement, many of his men then fled their posts, either by ship or jumping into the sea.
Even though this is interesting, I think this is my least favorite one to do. I mean, it's interesting, but I'm just saying, for me, it's my least favorite one. I'm happy to do it again.
Caesar attempted to retreat, but Port Eunostos' harbor was overrun with enemy ships, preventing escape. Reportedly, Caesar gathered his papers and leapt overboard in an attempt to swim to an Allied ship farther out. Historian Cassius Dio claimed that Caesar would have drowned if he hadn't been able to remove his purple garment. Still, he managed to swim the distance and survive. The Alexandrians recovered the cloak and used it as a trophy to commemorate the Roman debacle.
Idiodin, elavni nuki gnostis. Vlax,
Well, if she sounds perfectly normal and natural to you, that would explain things.
Unhappy with Ganymedes and wanting their king restored, the Alexandrians approached Caesar with a compromise. Caesar agreed to release Ptolemy XIII after entreating him to spare the kingdom and remain loyal to Rome. Once freed, however, the king defied the agreement and continued the war.
Which is what a Ptolemy would do. Treaties mean nothing. Treaties meant lots to the Romans. In terms of agreements, for the most part, they honored them, even if they had a ulterior motive. But they were very choosy about which ones that they got into, lest they sully their reputation and honor by, participating in an outright lie. Although if the person who makes the agreement loses power, all those agreements are null and void as they are, today.
By this time, a faithful ally of Caesar's, Mithridates, arrived in Egypt, clashing with Ptolemy's troops at Pelusium. Outnumbering the enemy, Mithridates secured the region between Pelusium and Alexandria. Ptolemy, warned of Caesar's ally marching on Alexandria, sent his troops to prevent passage over the river.
I can't know for sure what they said, but there's probably something to do with me being in the middle of the road or blocking their way. But it was a middle-class Greek.
Mithridates warned Caesar in time, and the two groups confronted the armies of Ptolemy in the Delta. In the Battle of the Nile, the Romans gained the upper hand, sending the Egyptians fleeing. In the tumult and panic, King Ptolemy XIII drowned in the Nile.
Poor baby. I found him to be such a despicable character that I could have watched that happen with a bowl of popcorn. And I'm sure he just drowned. But the idea of a hippo gobbling his no good butt up, so I can sleep contentedly with that. Cleopatra was a Ptolemy too, but in terms of her leadership, she actually really did care about the people of Egypt and didn't want to see them exploited she wanted to exploit them herself, not have the Romans and Greeks, or more the Romans, do it. But she fancied herself as Egyptian. She made herself Egyptian. But to that end, I don't like games that, like Civilization game, the last Civilization game, they picked Cleopatra as the leader of Egypt. You have a 5,000-year history of Egypt, and you pick a Macedonian Greek product of incest, as the leader to that country that saw its downfall. That's like, they'd be like, okay, Trump will be the one who represents the United States. We're in the last season of America right now.
After the siege ended, Cleopatra VII married her younger brother, Ptolemy XIV, enabling her to reign over Egypt until 30 BCE. Under her rule, Alexandria settled into its position within the Roman Empire and eventually surpassed Athens as one of the most important cities in the Roman Empire. Julius Caesar remained in Egypt for a short time. He and Cleopatra would later have a son named Caesarion.
Ptolemy Caesarion, which means Ptolemy, son of Caesar. And the Latin pronunciation of Caesar is Kaiser. And if that sounds familiar, it absolutely is, because Kaiser is the German word for king as well, spelled with a K. But just so you know, when you read Latin, anything that starts with a C, it's a hard C. It's a bit of trivia for you. And that is the Battle of Alexandria in a nutshell. I don't know why they call it a Caesarian, but, well, here's the thing. I can guess why they call it a Caesarian section, but it's only a guess. Caesar's daughter married the much older Pompey, who became his political rival. She died giving childbirth, and that devastated Ptolemy. I mean, to no end. But it complicated matters politically, and things snowballed from there to basically the Ptolemaic king trying to get points with Caesar by chopping the head off of Pompey. And that really pissed Caesar off. He said, "You stupid asshole. I'm going to keep you on a leash, you prick." And basically, when Cleopatra arrived with the, "Hey, would you like to be a god? Would you like to be a pharaoh of Egypt?" You'd be second to me, but first in Rome. And she sent him on he and her went down the Nile in a very fancy, opulent yacht, touring the area, having people basically throw gifts and flowers, and basically he said, "Ooh, I can get behind this." And the Romans said, "Hey, that Cleopatra, she's just a seductress and a witch." Their propaganda bashed her, and you can't, at this time, you can't stand in Rome's way. So, yeah, something like that. It really was dramatic. And in the Ptolemaic sense, it was just insanity. Introduction to Alexandria. This is where I'm probably going to enjoy myself a bit more. I did enjoy that, but the Siege of Alexandria was, of all of them, my least favorite, just because I'm not really all about the fighting. I like the daily life and the creation of things more than their destruction.
Welcome to Introduction to Alexandria. After conquering Egypt in 331 BCE, Alexander the Great decided to build a new city, which, as per his habit, he named after himself. After his death, Alexandria quickly became the capital city of the Ptolemaic kingdom and the most important city of the Greek world.
I think he had 12 cities named Alexandria, and the one that took was this one. So I wonder if historically, if the other one flourished, if they would have had Alexandria north or east.
The city was built between the Mediterranean Sea and Lake Mareotis, which resulted in Alexandria becoming a crucial cultural hub and trading center.
Jean-Claude Gauvin. I love his work, and there's nobody else in the world that does what he does, bringing ancient cities back to life from fragments and little bits of archaeological information. I admire what he does so much, and I hope he's well compensated and well remembered for it. And they did such a beautiful job bringing it to life. Now, Odyssey is grander in terms of graphics and things and gameplay, but I like to hang out in Egypt. It's just my favorite place to be. Been obsessed with it since I was a kid.
Sumptuous buildings could be seen wherever one turned their gaze. The royal palaces, the many temples, the gymnasium, lush public gardens, and large avenues.
There's some more work from Gauvin. And do I still have you watching?
Αδαΐσισι, γνώσιν ελάβει, ουδε πόποτε κατέχεις.
That looks like it might be a faience cup. That'd be something if that was carved from turquoise. I doubt it though. That's cool. There's a sale on Steam for this whole Discovery series for like $7.99.
With its incomparable beauty and advantageous geographic location, Alexandria attracted foreigners, intellectuals, and traders. One of the most cosmopolitan cities of the ancient world, Alexandria supplanted even Athens as the most important Greek city in history.
And it's easy to see why. These are comparatively small obelisks, but they could weigh over 400 tons, which is immense. You know, oh, 400 tons, okay. Imagine moving that around.
Egyptian obelisks were highly prized by Roman architects. While Roman design previously favored the use of a single monument, Egyptian obelisks tended to come in pairs and were generally located at the entrance of temples. Several ancient Egyptian obelisks are still in existence today, though many are spread out across the world in locations such as Paris, Rome, New York, and London. All of this shows that Alexandria was significantly influenced by the rich past of Egypt.
These were monoliths carved from granite and plated with gold at the tips. I resent the fact that some of my former friends obsessed on the phallic nature of it. It wasn't that at all. It was a representation of a sunbeam. They really obsessed on that, which kind of made me wonder what their orientation was. Turned out one of them was transgender, and the church gave him the boot for that. But the other one went along with it. Thought it was a stupid academic exercise as far as that went. And when I became educated on what it really was, I never really assigned anything phallic to it, just thought of it as a structure with a cool design. And I think the obelisks look fantastic. I think they're very majestic looking all their own. And they have a symmetry and a flair that doesn't require a whole lot of complexity.
Alexandria had several main streets. Its most famous artery was the Canopic Way. It was lined with sumptuous buildings, houses, and temples, and was roughly 8 kilometers in length. This street was one of the most important shipping entrances to Alexandria, and often hosted processions and festivals.
They did a brilliant job bringing it back to life.
Πότε διδάσκεσαι σε Λάρνη, τύπο πρώην και εχθές.
Some of the kiosks, and they're either on break or whatever, but usually when you go to these places, you'll see people. I mean, you can't actually conduct business, but you see them plying their trade. Like this guy makes statues, or at least sells them. And he's like, hey, buy these statues. Stat, man. There's a bust of Caesar. That is Serapis on the far right. And the lady there is Cleopatra. And that might be Alexander, I don't know for sure. I feel stupid even guessing, not knowing, but hippo made from turquoise. Tusks or teeth or horns. No, I think they're horns from an ibex. The apis bulls, cats, Anubis, incense burning. I kind of wish we could get subtitles. Oh, this guy's, making a statue. Although you're not going to see anything get made with him doing it. You'll just see him hammer away for effect, but it's still cool. I love the detail they put into this game. I love it so much. And that's the horse with the 2 crowns of Egypt. The upper and lower Egypt crown. And this guy's fashioning jewelry. When you get time, look up diadems from ancient Egypt. They're very, very beautiful. I would have loved to have known what their incense smelled like. Because I know they like to use frankincense and myrrh. I think frankincense was their primary one. It takes like an acre of myrrh to make an ounce of oil. You had to be a real big shot. So you'd have to be pretty well-to-do to outfit your horse in this. This is one of those places you go to where you don't even ask the price. You better have lots of money. Oh no, that's... Oh, who the hell is that? I know 3 of these figures, but I feel stupid for not knowing who this one is. It's a feminine face. So I don't think that's Alexander. I wonder if it's Arsinoe, but no, the red cloak. Gosh, I don't know. I'll have to research that. So I'm going to go ahead and shut my mouth and continue. But yeah, I'd sometimes like to just walk slowly through the city, just to look at it, like I get to be there. Get to virtually tour the place. And sometimes I just do that for my own enjoyment, for fun. And more horse stuff. Linen. I wonder if that's water or beer. Buy my stuff. I guess this is where people like to sell a lot of statues.
The width of the street, 30 meters, was abnormally large even by Greek standards. This is likely because the Canopic Way was made in a short span of time and based on an urban plan, as opposed to being slowly built over time, as was usual for the era.
I think it served them very well in the end to do that. That took a lot of foresight to do that. For selling some linens. That looks like a... Yeah, that's a synagogue, although the Star of David wasn't used until, I think, 1100 BCE. I mean, AD, excuse me. 1100 CE, excuse me, derp. I'm rambling a bit. Grain and pottery. Now, this is grains. Yep, grains and produce and papyrus reeds. Stocks of papyrus. Yum, fish. You can't beat fish that's been sitting out all day. Emmer wheat. I imagine you could get that cheaper than processed if you have the means and the patience to process it yourself. Lentils, meats, mangoes, carrots.
The Canopic Way originated in the western cemeteries, skirted the gymnasium, and then exited the city to head east through massive doorways towards Canopus. This structure was known as the Canopic Door.
I hope you've enjoyed that. So let's see the next one. This is the next one talks about planning Alexandria. Yeah, when you do the discovery tours, especially, there's no violence or anything like that. But they also make things more G-rated. You know, it's like if there's a statue with nudity in it, they put seashells. I find that to be kind of silly.
Welcome to Alexandria, planning of the city.
Some Ptolemaic soldiers on patrol, who, if I were playing, would cease to exist very quickly.
Alexander's plan to build his great city began with a verse from Homer's Odyssey. There is, in front of Egypt, in the sea with many swells, an island called Pharos. Guided by these clues, Alexander the Great founded his future city at the western end of the Nile Delta.
This mosaic is kind of well known, but there are, I guess, people that could see this and not know who it is. But yeah, his empire was, in his day, was the biggest ever known. Might still be, actually.
Though Alexander considered this location ideal for his great city, it presented considerable challenges. Too difficult to access during storms, the surrounding swamps threatened disease, and the limestone soil prevented the growth of healthy crops. However, due to the influence of his mentor Aristotle, Alexander the Great recognized that the true value was its strategic emplacement. Alexander knew that in controlling Pelusium to the east, Memphis to the south, and his crowning glory Alexandria to the west, he would create a triangular stronghold, allowing him to control the entire delta while giving him access to the Mediterranean.
And that was an intelligent move. 1, 2, 3. And the Nile Delta is the most fertile, as you might imagine. But all along the Nile, you see the greenery, and that's from the flooding. This silt, very fertile silt that came up, just was ideal for growing just about anything. And what I'm gonna do, because I don't like night tours, I'm gonna make sure this gets done in morning light. Because I do run the risk of running my mouth. And I think I got demonetized by my cussing because I make so much money doing this. Oh well. It's worth it for the fun factor though.
The Great Walls of Alexandria had a humble beginning. Lacking chalk to outline the future city's foundations, architects were forced to use flour instead. Clouds of migrating birds swept down and ate the flour, erasing the plans. This prompted Alexander to seek guidance from the oracles, who reassured him that his future city was destined to feed a large population.
Well, that was true. But you could always say that the Nile Delta was capable of such at any time. A papyrus marsh. Yeah, when you see things like this in the Egyptian stuff, it's papyrus. You'll see some of the columns resembling this shape in the temples, and that's papyrus.
Excavations led by Mahmud Bey el-Falaki in the 19th century revealed that the wall enclosure measured approximately 5.2 kilometers in length and 2.2 kilometers in width. It was roughly 9 meters in height.
That's enormous. That's impressive by today's standards. Let alone 2,500 years ago. Well, maybe more like 2,300 years ago. That's a better gauge. I wonder how long it took them to do that. And I wonder who painted this and when. Not that it matters, but...
These formidable ancient walls would resist a number of attacks, including fending off the king of Syria in 169 BCE. It wasn't until 295 CE that they eventually fell to Roman Emperor Diocletian, and this only after 8 months of relentless assault.
Effing Romans.
Alexandria's principal architect, Dinocrates, chose a Hippodamian grid plan. The grid maximized functionality, with wide, straight roads and canals running beneath them. Alexander recognized the military value of the city's design. The wide, parallel streets gave him optimal surveillance of the city, while allowing the unobstructed flow of troops.
They're either building or maintaining a chariot. Different kinds of wood were used to make these. I think when you see those circles, you're able to step in there and... Oops, I double tapped. You can assume the position of the person that would be doing that. You gotta fix that thing, stat! I wonder what this side does. Oh. Yeah, they know what they're doing. Just hit that thing. That'll fix it. It looks like leather on there, but yeah, they had to use different kinds of wood to make it springy where it needed to be springy, hard where it needed to be hard, stiff where it needed to be stiff, etc.
A central corridor ran from the Mediterranean's north port down to Lake Mareotis to the south. This thoroughfare acted as an unobstructed link for commercial trade and travel between the two ports. Many of the streets were bordered with grand buildings and parks, including Canopic Street, with its impressive gate bordering the eastern end.
There is a house across the Mareotis in Sais that I just love. And when this is over, I'm going to zap there real quick.
Alexandria was most likely built upon an already existing Egyptian village. Upon its completion, the Egyptians reviled the city, refusing to call it by its founder's name. Instead, they called it Raked, the building, as a mark of disdain, which was later Hellenized into Rakotis. Despite this, the name Alexandria would remain.
Yeah, and unless you were selling something that they really wanted or transporting something, if you were Egyptian, you had to have a damn good reason to be in Alexandria. It was not a, hey, come one, come all. If you were a priest or you had a lot of status, it was okay, but nah, you couldn't, I don't think you could be a commoner who wanted papyrus for something. I don't know what a commoner would do anything with papyrus with it. But yeah, you were either a servant or you had to have a reason to be there. It was like, show me your papers.
Samuel!
And I'm going to see if I can use the map and go to his size. This would be, I think, here. I just wanted to show you that house. It's really cool. Yep, you had to be totally legit. And that meant mostly European. If you were really hot, you could probably be a prostitute. Male or female, who knows. But I love this villa. I mean, it's just straight up cool. The location of this property. And it is a really swanky place. There's somebody playing a flute in the village square, I think. Whoever lived here had some serious status. The proximity to the lake. I think when you take the tour, you can... I wonder if she'll drink or if she's just going to act like she's going to serve. Actually, I want to make sure that I have the game volume. And sometimes I like to just virtually hang out here. There's a family mortuary temple. If you were a big mucky muck, you had something like this to add legitimacy to your status. It's basically a memorial to your family. And there's an olive grove. As you can see, I've been here before. They're stomping grapes. There's an olive grove. That lady has status. Yep, olives. Check this out. You harvest olives by knocking them out of their tree. One of the cool things about the Discovery Tour is you get to do that. And yeah, I like the music too. A lot. The, I like all kinds. Sometimes it gets a little beyond my, I say beyond my taste because it sounds so antiquated. This person's processing olives. So this person had enough land to do a lot with what they had, and I'm going to climb up on the top of the house for a more commanding view. But its position along here. I'll send the bird out. It's just such a, high enough to be away from the major flood risks. And with compartmentalized, walled up garden, there's a lot of options you had for growing things. But it just has a nice commanding view of the whole lake. And you can see Alexandria in the distance, and at nighttime it looks really cool. You have lights in the city. I just wanted to take a bit of a break to show this place off. It was just really neat looking. Thanks for the patience there. And back to Alexandria, a commercial hub. Oh, this may delve into the merchandise that they sell there. But yeah, I love it. Just and it is. It's serene and it's just peaceful and nice, and it's set to a theme that I like so much. I'll take a few sips of coffee here. It's kind of cold now. They cover a lot of cool stuff in these.
Welcome to Alexandria, a commercial hub. The ports of Alexandria were a major commercial hub, effectively connecting Egypt with the Mediterranean regions and beyond. A tremendous amount of materials and goods flowed through the city on a daily basis. The large port market was called the Emporion. It was there that merchandise was traded by the ship owners, called nakliros.
Oh, Diamelias, Ugar and Lavri Yignoskis, Dinamax.
This is probably the kind of exhibit I like to look at the most. I think this guy's selling incense, herbs, or remedies on top of all this. Looks like a child's toy. That dude's standing on the table. That's a bit irregular. Wonder if I ought to... Nah, I'll just leave the character up. If you want to see a different character, I'll switch it up. Scribe doing scribe things. What if they're collecting taxes like a port authority?
Food and other artisan work streamed out of Egypt. Ceramics, glass, golden rings, and minted coinage. The local potters, using traditional Egyptian techniques, competed with those from abroad, and the textile industry flourished. What Egypt did not produce itself was acquired through trade, using local resources such as wheat and papyrus. Most sought after was pine wood from Syria, iron and marble from the Greek islands, gold from Spain, and exotic fruits from Europe. All this commercial activity contributed to the already decadent wealth of the city.
Veo. Τι είστε κύφλες. Σήμαντε δούνε, απήντησον.
Άνθρωπε αγαθέ, άνθρωπε καλέ, ένθα δε ώρα.
Yum.
Άνθρωπε, σήμαντε δούνε αν μη ακούας. Παραένθα δε. Άνθρωπε, σήμαντε δούνε αν μη ακούας.
It's getting to be sundown. Oh, so I would just sit on that if I went on there. Take a quick run through. Like they're fashioning rope. Buy grain in bulk. Oops. I'm sorry.
The wood imported to Port Mariotis through Alexandria's seaward ports
wish you could
was
get
used in the
something.
nearby shipyards, where most of Egypt's ships were built. Employing tens of thousands of shipbuilders, the shipyards contributed to establishing the Egyptian fleet as one of the mightiest of the era. Any wood not used in shipbuilding was further disseminated through Egypt for various purposes.
Wow, that's quite a boat design. I'm not sure how impressed I am with that. If it would be hydrodynamic if this, I'm assuming this wasn't blocked off, that water went underneath and through there. If that was blocked off, it was, as far as hydrodynamics would go, a fiasco. But that looks amazing. I haven't seen anything like this depicted in the game. I would love to see something like that. And I like seeing a progression of things, even if it's simple, like the way they added it into the game. Like you can literally see this guy sawing down there. Even though you don't see anything really get consumed, I like the imagery. And I love the way Alexandria looks at night, but I don't know how cool a tour would go, because you lose a lot of visibility at night. But if you want to see it at night, let me know. Otherwise, I can bring it up to morning again. You also don't see the hay bales or hay pile get shorter. Now if you want to be a jerk while you're playing the actual game, you get a torch, you toss it into there, and people freak out. So if you're bored and you're feeling a bit psychopathic, and you want to amuse yourself or mischievous, you can light things on fire, and you hear people go, and they'll try to kick dust on it, and when they get close to it, they cough. guys look very much like Port Authority people.
The southern port of Lake Mareotis was the biggest in Alexandria. Save for a branch angling westward, the lake's size in the Ptolemaic era was roughly 40 to 50 kilometers from north to south. Its waters were maintained by a steady runoff from the Nile. In addition to the lake, a man-made canal was created to assist in the transfer of goods from the city to the port using barges, though it is not represented in the game due to its size.
You have to make things smaller in the game to make them reasonable. Who want to spend all day walking from one part of the city to another? I would. LOL.
Banking was one of the most distinctive innovations brought by the Greeks to Egypt. The centerpiece of Alexandria's wealth was the royal systematization of taxes on almost everything. Basic items such as salt, oil, beer, wheat, and linen were heavily taxed. As a result, the royal treasury of Alexandria was able to ensure the economic stability of most of the administrative areas of Egypt.
Philopator. Ptolemy IV, Philopator. Lover of his father and sick SOB. An appalling jerk. First three Ptolemies were okay, the rest were just freaks. Vile freaks. Man. You gotta be really exhausted to, hey, you know what, let's get a bedroll out into the street and have a kip. I'm not really over-enthusiastic about ports.
By the late 12th century, the channel feeding the lake from the Nile silted up. Lake Mareotis lost its connection to the Mediterranean, as well as most of its water, as the lake slowly evaporated to a fraction of its former size. In modern times, Lake Mareotis is being kept alive through irrigation. However, only about 17% of its original size remains.
Alright, did you want to continue? Or did you want to call it? I don't want to force anything. The next one is Alexandria, City of Celebration, which I imagine there will be more music and things to look at. And I'm going to restart my app in case there's been a cessation on that. Because the last thing I heard from you was about the fruit. I just want to make sure that's current. And oops, there we go. All right. finally got the proper update. So that will conclude this discovery thing. And I wish you guys well. Fair winds to all who see this. And until next time.